Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. In this video, we will be talking about Qalqalah. So Bismillah, let's go ahead. In terms of learning outcomes and what you should get out of this video, there are three main points. By the end of this video, you should be able to describe what Qalqalah is. And by the end of this video, you should be able to analyze and differentiate the difference between a Qalqalah and a Harakah. You should be able to differentiate between a Qalqalah which is considered Kubra and one which is considered Sughra. So a greater Qalqalah and a lesser Qalqalah. So Bismillah, let's get into the details. Qalqalah in general is a rather known or familiar subject. However, in reality, Qalqalah has some intricacies that is easy to fall into and to get Qalqalah incorrect or inaccurate. And we'll talk about this in the next few minutes. Let's start with an example of the ba. If I say ab, now that ba has qalqala, ab. And if you look at the lips are touching, then they are separating. Ab. So that separation that comes when I'm pronouncing the letter ba is producing the qalqala. Ab. So that's the qalqala with the ba. So Qalqala is the sound that comes with these letters due to the separation of two parts which are part of the makhraj, or two parts which cause the letter to be pronounced. So in the example of ba, these two parts are the lips. So they come together and then they separate. So that separation produces the sound of Qalqala. And Qalqala only applies to huruf which are sakinah. So the ba, when it has a sukoon, because if a ba has a fatha, ba, bu, bi, there's no qalqala with that ba. So qalqala only applies to huruf which are sakina. And the letters of qalqala are 5, and they are summarized or combined in a statement of qutubu jad. So qaf, the ta, the ba, the jim, and the dal. Let's take some examples for each of these letters. So with the qaf, we say al-falaq, al-falaq. You see how, did you hear the qalqala? Al-falaq with the qaf at the end of the letter or the end of the word there. And the ta, yut'im, yut'im. The ba, yubsirun, yubsirun. The jim, yaj'al, yaj'al. The dal, ahad, ahad. So with all these letters, the 5 letters of qalqala, as we said, the qalqala only applies if the letter is sakin. So in all the examples we just read, the letter was sakin. So that's one of the criteria for qalqala. And the other very important point is when the qalqala is pronounced, there should not be any harakah pronounced with the qalqala. This is a key point. When the qalqala is pronounced, we shouldn't have any hint of a harakah. No fatha, no dhamma, no kasra. It's just separation. Now, what do we mean by that? So let's go back to the ba. When I say ab, so that's correct. That's correct pronunciation of the qalqala. Ab. And if you look at my lips, they're just touching, then they're separating. Ab. That's qalqala correctly. Now, if I were to say a fatha or a kasra or a dhamma, let's say I would say aba. Now there's separation, but the jaw or the mouth is opening with the fatha. Aba, ba. And if I said kasra, bi, the lower jaw is moving downwards. Bi, abi. And if I say dhamma, abu, the lips are rounded and they come forward. Abu. Now with qalqala, let's go back to qalqala. Qalqala, we're saying ab. The lips are just separating. However, there's no hint of a harakah with the qalqala. There's no fatha or kasra or dhamma. In other words, there is no associated movement of the jaws or opening of the mouth or the jaw moving downwards. And these things are what cause fatha or kasra, or the rounding of the lips which causes dhamma. Qalqala is purely the separation, but with no associated harakah. So with no associated movement of the mouth or the jaws, that causes a harakah. And that's the subtlety, that's the very important point to get qalqala accurately. So again, we say ab, that's correct. And if I were to say abi, that's incorrect. That's closer to a kasrah. Or if I say abu, that's a dhamma. So that's not a qalqala. Qalqala is separation with no hint of a haraka. Now this sounds clear, but let's put it into a word and into practice and see how it can be very finicky. So if we take the word yubsirun and let's listen to the ba. So I'm saying yub with the ba, yubsirun, just a separation. But it's very easy to by mistake add a little dhamma with the ba and say yubsirun. That's kind of rounding the lips and that's bringing the qalqa towards a dhamma, which is incorrect. Another word, let's take the dal. Fad'u. So with the dal, in this instance, the separation, if you remember the makhraj of the dal, it's from the tip of the tongue with the roots of the upper incisors. So it touches where the root of the upper incisors is, touches there, then there's separation. Fad. So we're saying fad'u. You see, with the qalqala, we're saying fad'u, but we're not doing anything with the lips. So we don't want it to become a dhamma. We don't want to say fad'u. You see the intricacy there? Not fad'u, it's fad'u. So separation, however, no associated motion of the lips or the jaw or the mouth which causes a haraka. That is the key point. And with all the letters of qalqala, we're saying separation. With the ba, it's separation of the lips. Ab, with the ta, so it depends on the makhraj. So the ta, for example, it's from the tip of the tongue with the roots of the upper incisors. That's where it touches and that's where it separates. So ato. The jim, the makhraj is from the middle of the tongue with the upper palate. So aj, that's where it touches and that's what separates. The middle of the tongue with the upper palate, that's what separates to create or to pronounce the qalqala. Aj. So that separation is the qalqala. So for every letter, the separation is slightly different, but the idea is it's separation of the two parts that cause that makhraj or that letter to come out without an associated harakah, as we said before. So far we covered 2 points. We described what qalqala is, and then we analyzed and differentiated between a qalqala and a harakah. The third point is to talk about qalqala kubra and qalqala sughra. Qalqala kubra meaning a greater qalqala and sughra meaning a lesser qalqala. When we say qalqala kubra, that means the qalqala is louder, you can hear it, there's more echo to it than the sughra. And qalqala kubra, the greater one, is with letters of qalqala that come at the end of a word and you stop there. So if you were to stop قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ, the qalqala is, you can hear it very easily, it's loud, there's an echo that comes with it. Ahad, and it's because you're stopping there, so you can hear the qalqala clearer, and that's what we call qalqala kubra. So let's take a few words as examples. So we say al-falaq. So you hear the qalqala there on the qaf, it's very loud, it's very clear. Or with the ta, muhit. The qalqala is loud, it's kubra again because it's the end of a word and you're stopping there. And the last example, al-hajj. The jim there, the last jim is sakina, and that's the jim that has qalqala, and the qalqala is kubra, it's the greater one, you can hear it very loud and clear. Now the comparison is a qalqala which is sughra, and qalqala sughra, as we said, is not as loud as the qalqala kubra. So the lesser qalqala is not as loud. It's still a qalqala, but it's just not as loud. And that's when the letter of qalqala is either within the word or it's anywhere in the word but you're continuing to read. So if it's the second letter at the end of the word but you're continuing to read, so you're not actually stopping there, the qalqala isn't as loud. So for example, if you say yubsirun, there's a qalqala on the ba. That's a qalqala sughra. It's in the middle of the word, you're reading, continuing to read. If you compare it to kasab, the qalqala on the ba is greater. You can hear it, it's louder. And another example, الحج الحج. The qalqala on the jim there is clear, it's loud, while a sughra would be يجعل يجعل. So there's a qalqala on the jim, but it's not as loud as the other one. And a little intricate point, we're saying that qalqala sughra is for a letter which is sakin, either in the middle or the end of the word, but if you're reading. The idea is you're not stopping at that letter, because if you stop at that letter, then it's qalqala kubra. So in Surah Al-Ikhlas, when we say لم يلد ولم يولد, so there's two dals here. يلد, that one, when we're reading, it's a sughra. لم يلد ولم يولد. And the last one is kubra, يولد. Because we're stopping there, you can hear it, it's clear. So sughra is when you're reading, continuing to read, either in the middle of the word or the end of the word as you're reading. And kubra, the greater one, is when you're stopping on a letter of qalqala. يولد, you can hear the qalqala much clearer, much louder. Now let's go back to those learning objectives. We said that by the end of the video you should be able to describe what qalqala is and what's a harf that has qalqala. And we said that a harf that has qalqala is because of the separation of the two parts that cause that harf, separation that produces the sound of qalqala. However, there's no hint of a harakah. The second point, we said that you should be able to analyze the difference between a harakah and a qalqala. And it's all about the associated motion. So qalqala is just a separation, but there's no extra motion. There's no opening of the mouth. No ba, bu, bi. Just a separation that causes qalqala. That's the difference between qalqala and a harakah. And the third learning objective was, we said, you should be able to now describe the difference or differentiate between a qalqala which is kubra and a qalqala which is sughra. And we said that qalqala kubra, the greater one, is when you're stopping at a letter of qalqala. You're stopping at a letter of qalqala. Qalqala sughra is if you're continuing to read and there's a letter of qalqala, either within the word or at the end of the word, but you're continuing to read. The qalqala won't be as great or as loud as the qalqala kubra. We'll see you in the next video. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.